So the Switch did get its 5.0.0 update for firmware last night. We actually talked about it this morning in Newswave, so if you're all curious about the changelog or what was added, you can go check that out. It's in the card above. But a lot of people were underwhelmed by 5.0, right? There was nothing major there to us that we could see at the surface level. But what if I told you 5.0.0 is actually one of Nintendo's biggest update that they've really ever done for the Switch, and it's really in place for basically everyone but the end user. So one of the places I like to go after a new update comes out is gbatemp.net. They generally will talk about things in the hacking and homebrew section about what actually is in the firmware, because a lot of times we'll get a stability update, right? There's no real differences that we can tell. They'll say something like, oh, we made the system run better, or just maintenance, and a lot of us just go, oh, okay. Well, to them, that's generally a red flag, and they start to kind of run around like the place is on fire at times, because a lot of times that's added to go against people who are attempting to open up or exploit the system. And 5.0 was massive. In fact, the system now is about to be more so locked down than ever. They're even going as far as to change the physical layout of the internals of the Switch, and it is absolutely insane what they have added here to try to circumvent the possible massive exploiting that will go on for what could be a potentially massive selling system. Something they need to avoid, much like what happened with the PSP. So let's take a look at some of the changes here that were shown on GBA Temp. Now this particular post here was done by Nate Hacks on GBA Temp. This is after they had a talk with Robabla, who took a look inside of that firmware, really what was changed on Discord. And this is kind of an entry that that person actually gave them, saying, if you forget the fact that hacking 5.0.0 basically became impossible. The kernel now has Castler, so even though it hasn't even been hacked yet, even once, the bar is now raised to a whole new level. The crypto system was revised to be a pain, and the secure monitor was also further mitigated against deja vu. Nintendo really outdid themselves this time. Now, Castler is pretty well documented. We're going to go over that. The other two, though, I've told you guys before, I'm more into the hardware, as you see on the channel, disassembling, checking things out at a hardware level. I'm not really into anything that has to do with going through code or hacking or anything like that, even programming. I'm not really into that. So if you are and you understand some of the stuff here outside of Castler, like they were talking about with System Monitor, Deja Vu, I'd be very interested to hear what you guys say about it in the comments below, and if that is a massive step, much like Castler. And then the other thing we're going to go over here. But Castler, if you're not sure what that is, could throw a monkey wrench into a lot of hackers' exploits or how they were going about kind of hacking the kernel. You're going to see here, if you kind of break it down to what it stands for, kernel address space layout randomization. What they are essentially doing is the address space layout is being randomized. And what it is a well-known technique to make exploits harder by placing various objects at random rather than fixed addresses. So like in this case, an address line would be pretty much straight up or standard. It's more dynamic at this point where we've randomized and the system will know where it is. However, the person trying to exploit or make their way in maliciously, in this case to the system, will have a really hard time finding it. Now, Linux has had it for a while, as described here, and what's interesting, though, is Keys Cook wanted to apply it to the kernel itself. They've been pretty much implemented to a degree. So the kernel, in this case, the address lines will be moved around, and it's just much harder. I mean, think about it. Every time you try to enter, in this case, the kernel, or try to modify or do anything to it, it'll be at a different address line. So in this case, I assume if you're going to be hacking it, you would have to know I guess where it is, and that's going to be kind of tough if it continues to change dynamically or constantly even. What do? I guess every time you turn it on or it executes, the kernel is in a different place, or at least the address lines for it is in a different place. When they started mentioning Castler, people have been freaking out on the thread there, just in general, to the point where they're saying, do not update to 5.0.0 or you are never hacking this thing. Now, will it never be hacked? It's hard to say. I'm sure in this case, nothing's, I guess, forever in this case. But man, the way people have been describing it and kind of freaking out about this, it seems like Nintendo really has gone all out. And while Okay, the big thing you may have seen with fail overflow, for example, is saying Nintendo cannot patch our exploit. And to a degree, it seems like they're right. It seems like even Nintendo and Nvidia have admitted that. The big thing is the exploit is at a hardware level for the off-the-shelf Tegra that Nintendo and Nvidia seem to have dropped into the Switch. If you remember, there was that keynote from people like Pluto and stuff on Twitter where they talked about the way that they figured out how to exploit the Tegra was by looking it up in Nvidia's own manual for the Tegra, which is crazy. They provide these notes to people who are working on them, and they kind of just looked it up and figured out, oh, this is how we can exploit the Tegra. Well, it looks like, based on some other hackers or homebrewers, it looks like they're going to be changing the entirety of that Tegra at a hardware level. The tweet you're seeing here is from Michael, or Sires M, saying, looks like we got a SoC revision. Might be a good time to pick up a console with a vulnerable boot ROM. Now, switchbrew.org was updated to reflect the lines of code that he was talking about. Line 26, as you can see here, was different before 5.0. There's pretty much nothing there. Then it jumps over and you'll see how it looks after 5.0.0. And if you kind of look down, the fifth line there says provides configuration for the new T214 SoC. So it sounds like Nintendo and Nvidia are jumping out in front of this thing before Pokemon or in this case Smash Bros, before they really start moving. I mean, look, they've probably sold 18-ish million Switches by now, maybe even a little more. Before we start hitting a point where these things are flying off the shelf and it's going to be very difficult to fix it, years and years down the line because there'll just be so many of them out there. In their mind, they're going to pretty much put a stop to this cold turkey, and they're changing that entire Tegra chip out with something that's more secure or something that doesn't have the wealth of documentation that the Tegra X1 stock has right now. It was kind of a mistake. I'm sure it was cheap at the time, right, to make this happen, because the Wii U proved that the Switch, while it works well now and it's something that everyone's buying and is doing really well, it was obviously a risk, right? I mean, it's not like you can't really say you knew exactly that Switch was going to be killer, it was going to sell this much. No, they had to go a route that wasn't going to destroy them if it didn't work well. I'm sure Nvidia offered up those Tegras cheap, much cheaper than what it could have been if that Shield TV had actually sold. It's not. The Switch is selling Tegras now. So they obviously have gotten back with Nvidia, and they are building a chip that is probably going to start shipping this summer when 5.0.0 starts shipping with Switch units. I think right now it's 4 or 4.1, the one we had previously that's currently shipping. So in a month or two, we will start seeing these ones ship with 5.0.0. I have a feeling at that point, the revision for the Tegra will be in the Switch. It'll be a very quiet transition. You're not going to see it on, in this case, any sites that really cover Nintendo or anything. Nintendo is probably not even going to announce it. It's going to quietly work its way in, like we've seen with things like the PS3, even the PS4, where the chips have changed over time as they become smaller and cheaper. In this case, though, this is for security. So it's mainly to stop any of these hackers or homebrewers from exploiting it at a really hardware level. So Fail Overflow currently has a hardware method to hack into that Tegra. It's not going to work anymore. The boot ROM will change. Everything will change pretty much. So what do they do now? Well, I guess they can attempt to make it work, but with things like Castler and the other updates they've mentioned there and this revision, homebrewers are pretty much saying at this point, go buy one now, or you might not be able to hack it going forward, and at least not in the near future. Years down the line, maybe, but it seems like Nintendo took this very seriously. We already know they've been paying people, right, to bring exploits to them, and I have a feeling they've been building a little user guide of their own as to some of the people's favorite exploits and the favorite hacks. Trust me, I have a feeling that the exploit that was really getting into the Tegra and the ways they were doing it probably went for a pretty penny, right? They probably paid out thousands of dollars for that if somebody did bring it to them, or they figured it out on their own. I have a feeling there are some moles in that hacking community that are not telling people they're moles, and they're probably making quite a bit of money, right? Nintendo's paying them. It's smart. Money talks. And it seems like they are ready to pretty much clamp down on the hacking community with any Switches going forward, any games going forward, because Pokemon is surely going to work on a firmware beyond 5.0.0 and will require that update. Same with Fire Emblem, same with pretty much everything. Metroid, Smash Bros. So it seems like the hacking community might be kind of left behind after the first year, unless they figure out how to hack this new Switch revision for the SoC, the System on a Chip Tegra, figure out Castler, how to exploit the kernel while it's even more difficult now. So this is very interesting. If you are someone who works in the software parts of this, maybe you've looked into homebrewing at some point in time, and you recognize a lot of this stuff that was talked about from a software level. Again, let me know down in the comments. I think there's going to be a lot of people with questions for this, but the big thing you need to know here is while 5.0.0 was not really for the end user who is playing games and things like that, this was definitely to protect the Switch's future going forward, and it seems to have a lot of people who are working in the homebrew scene, who are working in the exploit scene, really annoyed, obviously, and really concerned about going forward as to this new challenge, I guess, placed in front of them, because to them, it looks almost impossible, as many have said. So if you don't like the hacking scene, you don't like the possibility of the Switch being opened up completely, you're probably pretty happy right now. So there you go. If you want to have a hackable Switch in the future, you might want to go buy it now before they start shipping 5.0.0 as a default firmware, and before they start revising that Tegra, because I have a feeling they're already on the lines, they're already being built in, and you're going to see them probably this summer, and that'll pretty much, I guess, put a stop to the hacking scene, at least for now. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. It really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave a bunch of comments down below about what you think about what's happening here, and if you were underwhelmed by 5.0 and now maybe you're like, wow, that is a good update for, in this case, I guess, fighting the hackers or people who like the pirate stuff. It seems to be stopping them kind of dead in their tracks right now. So we'll see how places like Fail Overflow or Team Executor can respond. Because if you remember, Team Executor was talking a big game there for a while about releasing a hardware mod that was impossible for Nintendo to fix. Seems like they might have called your bluff there and put something out. So we'll see what happens. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.